Everyone, it's now 1 o'clock. I think we'll just get underway since we've got limited time to have this briefing on the Māori wards. So before we get underway, Councillor Maxwell, could you open our hui with a karakia, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. E ino I tātou, let us pray. Kia tau anō, kia tātou katoa ata whai o tō tātou ariki a ihu kraiti. Me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki ta wairua tapu aia nei a ake tonu atu. Āmene. May the grace of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us now and evermore. Amen. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, Councillor Maxwell.
Recording in progress.
Oops. Okay, so good afternoon, councillors. We have an apology for lateness from the Mayor and from Councillor Waru. And good afternoon, Councillor Wang. I think you are online.
Morning, Anne.
Oh, it might be morning where you are, but it's afternoon here. Welcome, Una and Rick. We're in your hands. So you want to do the presentation first and then we'll take questions at the end. Is that how you'd prefer to take? Okay. So, councillors, if we can save the questions till the end. Thanks.
So, kia ora, councillors. So what we've got here today is a bit of a briefing, so an opportunity to guide you through what the legislation, which is before Parliament at the moment, will mean for Rotorua Lakes Council, and to, I guess, start you thinking about the future for wards and leading into the elections 25 and potentially the following representation review. As it stands at the moment, the legislation has been and is before Parliament. They've had two rounds of reading, and we expect that the sitting Parliament will look to pass this week. All intents and purposes are that effectively the draft bill will proceed as without any changes. The main exception there being that in a previous revision there was a decision point which was going to be optional for councils. What the amendment has put in place is that councils will need to make a decision on setting their direction going forward, and we'll come to that in due course. So provided to you in Stella has been all of the information that we currently have, and we've provided you with previous council papers when council also first looked at introducing the Māori ward under the then legislation. We've also provided you with some fact sheets and some flow diagrams which have all come out of DIA. And we will update those once the bill has passed so that you've got the exact wording as will be passed. So we'll get into it. What I'm proposing to do is just give a bit of a brief background on the introduction of Māori wards, then to take you through effectively a decision-making tree which that this council will need to consider in its processes going forward, and then happy to open that up for question and answers from the floor. So, getting right into it. Go, Marty, can you move it along? For some reason, it's not working. Lovely. Now I've got control. Wonderful. So Council first adopted Rotorua Lakes Māori Ward in 2021, and that was under the then Local Electoral Māori Wards and Māori Constituencies Amendment Act. Council adopted that on the 21st of May 2021. Now what that did, that it provided that decision that Rotorua Lakes Council would have a Māori ward for the elections in 2022 and in 2025. Subsequently from that, what happens is the first part of an overarching representation review is that councils must make the decision on the Māori ward, and then in having made a decision either to have a Māori ward or not, it sets the path for a representation review. So following the Māori wards being adopted, Council undertook its representation review, and at the end of that process, the Local Government Commission came in and made a determination that Rotorua Lakes Council would have an arrangements model which had a Māori ward that had 3 seats, it had a rural ward that had 1 seat, it had a general ward that had 6 seats, and a mayor which was elected at large. So when you're undertaking a representation review, councils do make a decision that decision is held in place for 2 election cycles. So again, that was for 22 and 25. And having a decision that sets in 2 election cycles provides an opportunity for the council and the community to see the benefits of that particular representation model and how that around the table feeds into and helps guide decision making for the district. In turn, the 2 cycles also provides experience and learnings to take into a subsequent representation review. So fast forward now to 2024, and the government has introduced into Parliament the Electoral Legislation and Māori Wards and Māori Constituencies Amendment Bill. This bill will reinstate the ability for binding polls on the establishment of Māori wards. It will also, for now, provide a transitional poll mechanisms for councils that either resolved to establish or established Māori wards since 2020 without holding a poll. And it will also, in that legislation, look to adjust some key election dates that allow more time for delivering voting papers. So what does this mean for the Rotorua Lakes Council? The key element here is that councils that established Māori wards last term are going to have to make a decision on their direction going forward by the 6th of September 2024. The decision point that they have to make is one of 2 options up there. This council, by the 6th of December, needs to either make a decision to disestablish the Māori ward for the 2025 election, or to go directly to a binding poll which will be held at the same time as the 2025 local election. And I'm just going to step through each of those pathways. So if we take a look at if a decision is made to disestablish the Māori ward, there are then 2 options for councils. Most councils may be able to roll back to their previous representation arrangement. So if that is a possibility, that would be going back to the 2019 arrangements. Back in 2019, Rotorua Lakes Council had all councillors elected at large. The other option is to undertake a shortened representation review and have that completed by very early 2025. There are limitations to both of those options, and we'll go into that in a minute. So with either option, rolling back to the previous rep review or undertaking a shortened representation review, it would mean that there are no Māori wards for at least the 2025 and the 2028 local elections. And there would be a requirement for a slightly different timeline there. Under a rollback option, the council would need to go straight into pretty much a representation review after the elections and be undertaking a rep review for the 27 and 28 calendar year. And that would be using the legislation, which would then be looking at a poll of electors. The other option there around a shortened rep review is that because you're undertaking a rep review, in this instance, ahead of year 25, which would lock in, year 25 and 28, a representation review wouldn't then be required until 2030-31. So the other key option available is that councils decide to go directly to a binding poll to be run at the same time as the local elections in 2025. The outcome of that poll will decide what arrangements the council will be looking at as a starting point for the next representation review. So if the poll results came in 25 that yes, there was to be a Māori ward, then a representation would be needed in 2027-28, but it would have that starting point of yes, there are Māori wards. And then the rules for the rep review are considerably different than if the outcome of the binding poll said no. You'd still be undertaking a representation review in 27-28, but the rules and the regs and what your starting point and what you're working with are very different. So under the option for yes for a Māori ward, under that option following the binding poll, that would mean that Māori wards would remain in place for at least the subsequent 2028 and 31 elections. If the outcome of the binding poll came in as a no, following the representation review, there would be no Māori wards for at least the 28 and 31 local elections. So that's just bringing us right back up to the beginnings of effectively quite a complicated decision-making tree there, with the key point being that there is a significant decision to be made by the 6th of September. However, it doesn't really get much easier either in coming along to that decision-making point time. The timelines that the government have provided with us are extremely tight and to the point where the options on the table are quite limiting. If the council chose to make a decision to disestablish the Māori wards, you would automatically be going straight into your rep review, and you would then be up against the clock, because by the 13th of September, that is the latest date in which an initial proposal to go out and consult on your representation review needs to be based on. You'll then see the timeline outlined there. This is effectively the shortened representation review timetable. And it is considerably tight and will be a challenge for councils going down this pathline. I suppose just before getting into questions, and one last point to make is that there's also a number of restrictions put around the rollback process as well. Just remind you that the Local Government Commission did come in and make a determination for Rotorua Lakes Council, which brought in the rural ward. So if there is an option that would be looking at rolling back to 2019, it's highly unlikely that this council could do that pathway either without seeking effectively permission or support from the Local Government Commission. Their determination trumps everything in a representation review process, and it's highly unlikely that a wind back or a council decision can then come in over the top of a decision that they have made. So that's where I was sort of going to take it to today, and just outlining the process that is before you. Happy to take any questions, and then equally to see if there is some direction from this council in terms of where to from here. So I'll open up for questions.
Una, perhaps if you just want to put it back to that slide with the...
The decision-making tree?
Yeah, and then I'll hand back to the Mayor to chair.
Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe te manukura o te rā tātou katoa. Kia ora Una. I caught the majority of that, so apologies for coming a bit late. Had another hui on. Where does the referendum kōrero fit into this?
So the referendum is the binding poll. So in 2025 there will be a referendum binding poll. Everybody seems to be using the two words interchangeably at the moment.
That's why I'm asking.
Yes, so it'll be a referendum. The question will go out in the voting papers at the same time as all of the information about candidates who are standing running in the 2025 elections. And the result of that will be binding. So whatever comes out of that will set the scene for what your representation review starting point is. But that will be for the 28 election. So 2025 will be the arrangements as this council currently has if you choose to go straight to the binding poll.
Thank you. And just supplementary to that, can the threshold was 5%. Does that stand still, or is that still being debated?
The threshold will come in after. So the threshold will be for subsequent representation reviews. What I've outlined here is what they're calling a transitional arrangement. So the option for the 5% poll doesn't exist this time round because it's a transition. That will come in the next round.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien, followed by Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Te Manukura. Thank you very much, Una. Could I just clarify, please, just following on from Councillor Waru's questions, if the poll goes ahead in 2025, it'll be a straight yes or no question. Is there any floor or ceiling, going the other way, so could I ask, if only, say, 3,000 people actually voted on that, it'll just be the highest number wins. Would that be correct?
I might just hand over to Rick for some of that, but my understanding is we've seen referendum questions, all of us, before. They're never particularly detailed questions. I suspect this will be another one. I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of what will be that question that is asked in that referendum. But yes, it's binding. If only 3,000 people, bothered to be a part of that referendum, then it would be the highest number that I'm aware of. Yep.
Thank you. And just a quick supplementary, could I also clarify just on what you've just said? So previously, if you could correct me if I'm wrong, if I wanted to disestablish or create a Māori ward, I needed 5% of the voting numbers in that district. Is that correct? How, if this legislation goes, can someone trigger that themselves? Can they create a referendum with their own wording? Or how would that work?
No. So what you'll get here is, so heading down the binding poll scenario, that decision will lock in for the next two. Yeah. So it'll be after those elections, those two rounds, that the poll by the electors would come back in.
Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the update and the briefing, I should say. Just going back to your final comment before we open for questions, where you were talking about the Local Government Commission, and there, I guess you could say, they are the ones who mandated the formula that we have at the moment, the structure that we have. Did the government take that into account for us? Because we're a pretty unique case, aren't we? Because it's going to be very hard to unwind something we didn't actually put in place ourselves. If they've mandated this is what you've got, then how can that be trumped?
I might just hand that one over to Rick because he is on our electoral subcommittee.
Yes, and thank you through the chair. Very, very good question. We're really tied to the legislation that's before Parliament at the moment, going into the third reading this week. So yes, indeed, that there is no leeway with regard to that. As Una said, we're in provisional or sort of transitional period to talk about or look at going down the disestablishment or a poll. Following from that, there was opportunities then under the new legislation, which reverts back to what we had in 2019 for polls, and then we get into the threshold of 5% to initiate a poll from the community.
Thank you. Supplementary question?
I'll just add a little bit more to that. I just think we need to be mindful that the Local Government Commission's determination with the introduction of a rural ward was based on quite a significant movement from the rural community for the introduction of the ward. And I guess we just need to be mindful here too of the disestablishment or potential disestablishment of one ward over another. And there's that kind of conversation doesn't appear to have been tested significantly so far, and something that I think all councils are likely to be on the back foot until such time as a council is kind of made to make the decision that is ahead of them. So quite a tricky area for us to navigate at the moment, with not a lot of advice to anybody in that particular area.
Can I just also add some comments on to your question, Councillor Patterson? So the fact sheet on the bill specifically says that tree path where you revert to the previous representation arrangements will only be available if the previous arrangements still meet the statutory requirements for fair and effective representation. So that's another level of complexity that this council would face if you were to go down that path. And the other part I'd say is in terms of whether we were given special consideration, the way the bill's drafted is there are only two groups of councils and one council singled out for different treatment, and that's Tauranga based on their electoral cycle. So we're just in the group of 40 councils, 31 councils that are in group one according to legislation.
Thank you for clarifying that. So my second question was around the pūtea that's going to be involved in this. If we chose to do the binding poll, that would be a charge to us of 50 grand. If we chose to do our own representation review, which would utilise more of our staff time and resources, would that be more than 50 grand?
I might jump in there. Look, I think it's fair to say that our briefing at this point is on the legislation rather than on any specific options that we've worked out the cost to do. I guess I'm not comfortable advising on what the costs are on scenarios that we haven't really looked at. It's safe to say that we don't have any plans. It's not in our resourcing plan or our work plan to do a shortened representation review in early 2025 on a time frame that's very, very aggressive at this point.
I have a question from Councillor Wing online.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Una, Rick and Andrew for the presentation. Just kind of in line with the other questions that have kind of already been asked. So it doesn't leave us with a lot of room to move around. If we were to roll, just to clarify, if we were to roll back to the previous representation arrangements, which was the 10 at large, that decision would, I guess, take effect if we disestablish, if we decide to disestablish the Māori wards, which would also mean that the rural ward would be disestablished as well.
So just to be clear, I'll let Una and Rick talk more about this. But just to be clear, it's not certain that this council has the opportunity to roll back previous representation arrangements, because the bill drafting says that that option's only available if the previous arrangements are still reflected statutorily today, and it's not clear that that's the case. So I might hand over to Una and Rick to answer the rest.
No, Andrew, I think you summed that up really well.
Thank you. And so, okay, so I guess that would be a bit of a potential side effect or domino effect that I think we need to keep in mind as well. But just with the binding poll, if we go down that route, would the organisation be taking a stance on that, or would the organisation remain, I guess, independent or neutral stance on, I guess, yes or no?
Councillor Wang, the council organisation will not take a stance on this.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you.
We'll go back to a question from Councillor Waru and then Councillor Lee.
Tēnā koe te manukura, thank you for your indulgence. Just really a clarification I'm seeking here. We've talked about the referendum or the binding poll and the threshold of 5% that's currently in play now. That only, if you can confirm it, that only applies to the Māori wards, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So any other ward we have is not affected by that same standard?
Other wards do have guidelines around around that, based on the Local Electoral Act and all of your guidelines, rules around undertaking a representation review. You may have heard or may recall from in the past this whole conversation about a plus minus 10%. So that provides some parameters in which, when you are looking at introducing wards, that you have a ratio of elected members to constituents. Of course, the Local Government Commission can come in and they don't need to adhere to those guidelines if they see, based on objections and appeals and the likes, and they can make their own informed decisions around those wards.
Thank you, Una.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. Just focusing on whether the option of 10 at large is potentially available to us. I think Andrew said the phrase was if the previous arrangements are statutorily reflected. I'm not sure what those words mean, but let's start with answering the question. Under the new law, I assume we would be able to choose 10 at large if that, from a legal point of view. Would we not?
So, Councillor, you've stepped into one of the questions that comes about in a representation review. It's not part of this decision that the council will need to make. There's a whole raft of decisions around the numbers that sit around the table, and that's the bit that comes in the representation review, that comes after councils have first established what kind of voting system they're going to use, which you'll have to relook at again, and then secondly, whether you have Māori wards or not. So that conversation is not for right now.
Yes, but that doesn't make any sense to me, I'm afraid. I think we need to know what options are potentially available to us. If we go down this route or that route.
Yeah, as has been mentioned to you, that is part of business as usual of a representation review. Councils have the opportunity at the representation review to discuss all of the options in detail.
And that would be one legal option that's available to us, surely, at that point.
That's what has been told to you, yes? Yes?
That's a yes, is it?
Yes, when we get to that point in time in a rep review, the council get to consider how many seats should sit around the council table in total. The minimum is 6 and the maximum is 30 from memory.
Yes, so, yes, okay, when I said 10 at large, I guess I meant all seats at large would be an option that's available to us under the statutory framework.
Only if the decision to not have wards of any sort is the result of your representation review.
Yep. Yes, okay, that answers my question, thank you. If a binding poll was required and then a petition, I'm a little unclear on the petition process, so would that, who would initiate the petition? Yeah, that's my first question.
Okay, no one can initiate a petition this time around. So for 2025, it's the binding poll,
Okay.
which will set out what your arrangements, well, which will establish whether there are wards for 28 and 31. A petition of electors would come in after that.
Okay.
Yep.
Councillor Lee, I might just add, so a petition might come in, and as long as it's not contradictory to the provisions of the bill, it might still be able to be incorporated. So, for example, if there's a petition to bring in a rural ward, then that's not covered by the bill. But if it is covered by the bill, then a petition won't be able to have any impact on the representation arrangements for those 2 cycles.
Okay, so that's not immediately relevant for 2025. Okay. So by 6th of September, we're required to make a decision to potentially rescind or not the Māori wards. Is that a simple majority required or a supermajority required for that decision?
The legislation has been unclear on that, even though we have asked. So based on no feedback from them, it'll be a majority.
Okay. I think that answers my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Una. The question I have for you, Enric, is it the 3rd reading that's coming up soon in Parliament? Highly likely the coalition government will be successful in passing what you put before us?
That's right, yep.
Even though thousands and thousands of submissions have gone in opposing what's happening here, so I won't repeat those because thousands have expressed against that. So highly likely going through to the 3rd one. So they're confident we have to have a decision by 6 September.
Yes, that's right. So when this was introduced into Parliament, and I think it was late last week, they put forward an amendment. So that decision-making point up on the 6th of September was going to be optional for councils to make. The amendment came through, which looks like it will pass, which is that councils will have to make a decision. So that's the key change in terms of the legislation. But for all intents and purposes, the remainder of the wording of the bill will be as has been drafted.
Are there any final questions? Councillor Lee.
For future reference, how many electors do we have in Rotorua? So what would 5% look like?
We can probably at this stage probably only go back to like the last elections. I'm not sure, we might have to circulate that to you unless Rick can remember those figures off the top of his head.
Yeah, it's about I'll have to go and research that, but I think if I can through just the chair, that the 5% only kicks in after the transitional period is over, or dealt with. 30,000 plus or minus, I can clarify that.
30,000 electors, so 5% of that is 1,500 or something, is it? Okay. Thank you.
We'll clarify that and we'll send that around.
Because remember, even though you've got your population stats, a lot of those are children under 18. Councillor Waru.
Kia ora, just another point of clarification. So the 2025, that's when this referendum thing would kick in. Okay,
That's
ka
correct,
pai.
yes. Yep.
Kia ora.
There appears to be no further questions. Did you have anything you wish to summarise, or are we done?
No, but it looks like Andrew does.
No, just wanted to clarify the response to Councillor Wadri's question. So 2020 for the 2025 elections, unless the Māori wards were disestablished, they would remain for the 2025 election. So they would remain, and together with the elections, there would be a binding poll or referendum. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you very much, everyone. The paper will come to Council in due course before the 6th of September, so likely August.
We are proposing to try and maximise the amount of time and thinking to look at having a meeting on the 4th or after. That must be I&E, I think, to run the council meeting after that to make that decision. Otherwise, we've got to bring the decision into August, which is shortening the time frame even more. So to maximise the time between here and the 6th, looking at the meeting on the 4th.
Thank you, and obviously after the third reading this week, we'll see where our government is landing. So I've got another question. Was it Councillor Patterson and then Councillor Waru?
So thank you for your indulgence. Just what's the steps going forward between now and then? What are we doing next?
I need some direction, or the organisation needs some direction from the council on what further work you would like us to do in order that we can bring back an informed paper for you to make that decision on the 6th of September or the 4th of September.
So do you want that from us now?
It's probably a lot of information download to give to yourselves right now, but if you've got some views, that would be quite good to get that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think given the nature that it's a briefing and some councillors may still be wanting to gather their thoughts and ideas on this before making any comments or giving direction yet, I think it would be helpful perhaps if we find another time to be able to do that, either at the council meeting or before, only if it was helpful for staff in preparing the paper. But do wish to thank and acknowledge staff for the information that they have been able to gather. As you've heard, they have been trying to seek further information and clarity, and it either has been non-existent or slow in coming forth. So we'll take some final questions before we do wrap up. We've got Councillor Waru and then Councillor Lee.
Tēnā koe te manukura. Just in terms of the comment you made around LG&Z, being able to come in over the top of a decision, what exactly can they overturn in this process?
Through you, so just to clarify, it's not LG&Z, it's the Local Government Commission.
Oh,
so
sorry. Yep.
Slightly different entity. And it's just the, at this stage, it's because their ruling and their determination of our representation model introduced that Māori wards. If this council was going to look at any sort of version of disestablishing the Māori wards, we need to go back and have a look at that determination, do some work with them around whether a rollback in particular will undo any of the existing fair rights around voter opportunities in that model, compared to what we currently have right now.
So So that's where their power sits in that area, not so much in the binding poll
Correct.
kind of thing.
Correct, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Lee, Maxwell and then Patterson.
Thank you. What options do we have in the next month or so to consult the community and get a feel for what the community might want?
It's entirely up to you, councillor. I'd be seeking some guidance from council as to what you wish to do.
If I can just add to that, just like to remind councillors that the council made a decision, as the presenters explained, for 2 election cycles. So we're not due for any review, or we're not due for any consultation with the community at this point until these 2 election cycles complete. So this bill obviously has landed with us from central government and we're responding to it. But absent that, we don't have any other plans at this point to consult the community, because the decision made by this council was for 2 terms and we're about halfway through the first one.
But would we have a more informal kind of consultation available to us via our website or Let's Talk or that kind of platform?
I suppose consultation is usually occurring because there's a decision to be made. The decision in many ways has been made for us, so unless we wish to disestablish Māori wards, which seems to not be the best way forward due to time purposes, there would not be any requirement for consultation until the representation review in the next term. Bearing in mind that the nature of a binding referendum is directly consulting and getting the feedback from people.
I was thinking we had a decision to make before 6th of September. That's what I was seeking community input on.
So Councillor Lee, what I'd say is we don't have any direction or decision from council, and council's made a decision. We're following through on that decision, which is to establish the current representation arrangement for 2 cycles. We're going to be doing that. That's our plan. That's what we're resourced for. That's what our work program states. In response to this bill, you will have a decision to make, and once you make that decision, we'll act on that new direction.
Perhaps, and yes, we will come to Maxwell and Patterson, perhaps a question on the back of that. Will there be information provided to the community in the lead up to the binding referendum? So as well as the usual communications that come from the organisation encouraging people to vote, there's usually a message from the Chief Executive. Will it also be the responsibility of council to inform the community about the binding referendum, or will that come from government? So I suppose, bearing in mind this decision outside of what the usual representation review is, because there is a decision of government.
Yeah, through you. So effectively there'll be an additional work stream program consultation required leading into the 2025 elections. So in terms of all of the lead up to election day and encouraging and getting constituents out there to vote, there is also going to need to be a significant amount of information that goes out to the community around the referendum question and what that is asking of electors, and I guess at that point in time putting information out about what this council currently has in terms of its representation arrangements and what an outcome of the poll could mean going forward.
Thank you. Got Councillor Maxwell, Patterson, and then we'll go online to Councillor Wing. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Una and Rick, and possibly even Anadu on this one, with the new census that is out, does that come into play now with all the information that you're going to need to find out? Because if I recall 3 years ago, the census had Māori at something like 28%, but then a real meaningful consensus was carried out, and it has come back with a 42% of Māoridom in our district. Will that alter possibly also the fact that it, instead of 3 councillors being eligible, it could be 4?
Yes. So if you were to undertake a shortened rep review, we would have to go and collect the latest census data on all of that, so that can inform an effective representation review. All of that will also equally be required following any outcome of a poll. So we'll need all of that information regardless of what path the council goes down.
Thank you.
And also just a reminder, the Māori population, it's actually dependent on the enrolment. So whether they're enrolled on there are Māori who are enrolled on the general roll. So it's based on the percentage of the people on the Māori electoral roll or the general electoral roll, not necessarily population, but...
But I think an increase from 28% to 42%, I think on both sides, it's going to be higher.
Thank you, Worship. Just wondering if perhaps, just putting it out there to my colleagues, we have, and this falls under the Community and District Development umbrella, I imagine, so we have a meeting on 14th of August scheduled. Wouldn't it be appropriate if we had another hui about this very important discussion around that time, so that we can give our hard-working staff some breathing space to actually get things moving before the 6th of September? 2 weeks enough for us to surely
14th
consider our options?
Thank you. We might just take that feedback on board and allow the staff some time to consider whether that would be useful or helpful, and also for us to consider whether we think we need to have further discussion beforehand. Thank you for that suggestion. So we'll go online. Councillor Wang, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick one in regards to, do we have an idea of the LG? I know that there was a bit of correspondence earlier on from LGNZ around their position, or I guess the collective position on this issue specifically. But do we have an idea of what LGNZ's, I guess, advice or advocacy is on this?
Thank you, Councillor Wang. There is some commentary from LGNZs on the remits, but again, what we're briefing you on today is the legislation rather than LGNZ's advocacy positions. So just responding and reacting to the legislation which stipulates what this council's obligations are. Sorry.
Well, thank you.
Any final questions? Would you like the opportunity for comments?
Yes, please. Kia ora te manukura. No, this is, there's 4 things there. These aren't real, actual, meaningful options. And it's not our staff's fault. It's not Rotorua Council's fault. It's just the way it's rolled with the government. I look at this with disdain, to be honest. This is not fair, and I've heard people around this table, very table, talking about sacredness of democracy and all this kind of thing. It's not democracy, it's hypocrisy. And so we got to do, when a small portion of the population can dictate what one particular part of the community can do and can't do, that's not democracy. So, I know we've got to make a decision by 6th of September or on the 6th of September. So, I don't know what a way out of this or whatever like that, but, this is not on, and I just want to put that out there again, that this isn't on and it's not fair. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Waru. Okay, well, we will... Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. So just being absolutely sure, let's say we go to the binding poll yes says we retain the Māori wards. They will be there from 2028 and 2031 elections. So that's 2 more election cycles after 2025. And the same happens, no. So after we still get 1 more cycle if it's no, which of course starts in 2025. So we get that cycle, but then it comes to the end in 2028.
So we have to vote on it in 2025.
Correct. So we get 1 more cycle.
Yeah, 1. We're only being on 1 now. We've got 1, that's 2. Whoa, mean.
Leaf, and then Maxwell.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. Just want to say that I think the staff have done a great job of explaining all of this to us. It's understandable, and I'm not sure what need there is for any other further briefing before we get around to making a decision, but I'm comfortable with the information provided thus far.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. It's been helpful, the briefing. Just following on from what Councillor Patterson had just said, and just following the line that he did go, can I also just add that whilst it might seem here we were elected by our people, we are pushing for as best as possible for a shared, that's the way we looked at it, shared governance. Even though we've been sort of advocating for our side, I do want to say through to Karen that in some ways I include rural, because in many ways when the Commission came back with the decision that 3 Māori ward councillors and a rural one, it got in our community quite universal support for that, and even so for ourselves. So I wanted to say that so that, you know, it's not a them and us or anything like that, but yeah, thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much, councillors. Thank you once again to our staff, and we will have confirmation to you as soon as possible on when we expect the paper to come before council. I would now like to ask.
Let me do a karakia.
Okay, Councillor Waru, if you could please finish off whahui with the karakia. Thank you.
Kei noi tātou. E honore he krore ki te atua e mau ngā rongo ki te whenua he whakaaro pai ki ngā tāngata katoa āmini. Hangawaira e te atua he ngā kouhau ki roto ki tēnā ki te nō mātou. Hara i tia mana ki te amai mātou roto i a mātou mahi katoa. Pā i hoa e orana e manana i ngā taumutunga kore. Koe hoki tō mātou kai whakaora. Āmini. I feel better now.
Thank you, everyone.